If you're thinking of selling your practice to a DSO, or if you're on the medical side, an MSO, please be eyes wide open. Remember, they buy practices all day long, but you only sell a practice once. The buyer knows more than you do, and they care about themselves more. That's not a judgment call. It's just true. Can a sale to one of these entities be a good sale for you? Well, yes, it can. And my guest today helps dental practices find good buyers, and his advice really is going to help just about any seller. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. That's usually what they want, and care is better when the provider owns the practice because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think is best for their patients. It's different when somebody else owns it, or it can be different. Sometimes their agenda starts to creep in. It's more for the provider to think about. Let's just keep it simple, keep it private. My guest today is Sean Hudson. Sean is a partner with Hudson Transition Partners, a practice brokerage service for dentists. Sean is past president of the National Association of Practice Brokers and the current co-chair of the Practice Valuation Study Group. Hudson Transition Partners has transitioned over 600 dental practices and completed well over 1,000 dental practice valuations. They've been transitioning practices for over 20 years. Additionally, Sean is published in dental economics and speaks annually at the NYSDA and is a past speaker both at University of Buffalo and NYU. Sean, thanks for coming on Practice Care.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this one because there's no universally good or bad. Things are different tools and they have different fits. And I think you would know this better than I do. There's probably a lot of opinions and maybe information and misinformation about the DSO world. So hopefully we can clear some of that up and figure out where it's a good fit. Before there, my regular listeners are probably bored by this, how I phrase this question, but the bio I asked that I just read was short. Want to get to know you a bit better. Tell us more about yourself. Help us get to know you.
Let's see. Besides the work stuff, father of three, married, beautiful wife, 16 years. Played lacrosse in college. I'm a hockey dad. My son's a goalie.
Right.
Spent a lot of time doing that, traveling the country, and sometimes out of the country for that. I'm pretty busy. Especially with running this business. And typically, on average, we have well over 50 clients at a time going. So,
right.
Yeah, I'm busy.
You're busy. Yeah. And just the college football nerd, I just learned you're a big Alabama fan.
Yes, I am.
Michigan fan. This is the one and only year we're going to be able to hold anything on you guys. You'll be back faster.
I hope so.
And I say that as a in love with the Wolverines, but
yeah. Now I am painfully a Bills fan also. So you know I can't.
The world needs him. I remember the four. I remember the 4 in a row. Couldn't believe I was watching 4 Super Bowls.
Keeps popping up on my Netflix, the documentary, and it bothers me every time I see it.
That poor kicker. Poor kicker. Okay, let's get into it. So we're talking about DSOs, dental service organizations as buyers, sort of roll up and buyers of dental practices. What do DSO buy? The buyers, what do DSOs want when they're looking at a practice to buy?
Yeah, so I will say in the past, years ago, it was always practice doing $800,000 a year, 5 operatories, had to be profitable, and it had to be in a location where they can attract associates. So that was it. Now I'm seeing revenue, what they're looking for is about $2 million or pushing there. Wow. Most of the practices that I see, that I have that are doing $1 million or so, they're not a target for the larger DSOs. Okay. That can also get into what's a DSO, right? There are a lot of smaller groups. I call them multi-practice owners. They're not the Heartlands, I'd say Aspen Dental, but they don't buy practices. Pacific Dental, those places, those are the big boys. So there are definitely, you could find opportunity if you have a smaller practice with one of these smaller groups.
Why the change? Why did it go up so much?
Just because they grow so much. So they're trying to add, it's the same amount of work and, legal work, everything to, purchase a smaller practice as it is a bigger practice. And just keep in mind, all these guys are, a lot of them are just positioning themselves to sell themselves. So the bigger they can get. Yes. A lot of them.
To who?
to other bigger DSOs
biggest, yes.
mostly, you know,
Jeez.
and just be able to get more investors in private equity, raise more funds.
Okay.
So the bigger they are, the more money they can raise.
Got it. And I've run across one or two people kind of all but randomly where, you start talking and networking and they're working with sort of a startup DSO and they've got a handful, but it's not like a multi-location couple of owners. It sounds like, yes, you sound like you're a small DSO that wants to be a bigger one. Are you seeing like to go get those $800,000 practices that the big guys don't want? Is that you have a big smile on your face?
I see them a lot. I see them a lot. I unfortunately see a lot of husbands of dentists. They want to be the next Aspen Dental.
Okay.
They have a little business background. They think they're going to take over the world. I get several calls every week from them. And my standard question is, how are you different?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they all have the same cookie cutter approach and they're pretty much almost all the same.
Okay. And is other than the size, so 2 million minimum, location where you can hire associates, and there was a third one that you said. Are they all still the same?
Yeah, typically, you have at least 5 treatment rooms.
That's what it is.
Yeah, just the space. Also, just they don't typically want to buy real estate. So if you own real estate as a seller and you insist on selling the real estate with the practice, chances are that they're not going to buy it. Sometimes partners of the DSOs will have a separate real estate investment company where they would buy it separately.
Okay.
But not always. The actual DSO would not be purchasing. I have not come across one that purchases real estate.
And that's just what they just don't want to be a landlord on top of a DSO.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that's what the buyer side is looking at. When it comes to the sellers, what kind of advice do you give sellers when they start talking to DSOs? I picture myself, I'm doing this thing for this very large thing for the first time, and I'm sitting across from people who do it all day long, and they could be really honest or they could not be, and it'd be hard for me to tell. You know what I mean? So
my biggest advice is have somebody representing you that's dealt with them in the past.
Yeah.
Because you've never done this, right? And I quite honestly, my business is not, it's not selling to DSOs. Okay. 95% or more of my business is selling to independent doctors, private doctors. So, also, first of all, they're not as big as they appear. Okay. So they're not taking over the world. I want everybody to keep that in mind. One of the biggest risk factors that I see is that promise of that stock in the future. Okay. You mean like, say, we're going to give you this much, but you're going to have this much, equity in DSO. And unfortunately, I've seen too many times where, they tell somebody that each share is going to be worth $50 and it's worth nothing at the end. So I would say that any offer, I would only consider the cash at hand at closing, and anything over that, just if you get it, great, but don't count on it.
Okay. What other have somebody represent you? As you said that, I thought, would I sell my house on my own? No, I'd get a broker and get a real estate agent, because what do I know? Yeah. Just legal, let alone get a good price or whatever. Similar concept?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You need somebody who's been around the block, right? You need somebody who's dealt with them and who's, these guys, they're savvy. These are private equity people. These are basically Wall Street people, people that have MBAs and will just run circles around you.
Right.
About the finances. And there's a lot of little tricks that, they do, promising, a multiple of EBITDA, right? Well, guess what? EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Okay. Here's the problem. They're the ones that calculate that EBITDA, right? Okay. But what I want every doctor out there to know is, let's say you're doing $1 million a year. All right. And you bring home $400,000 a year, and they're going to promise you, 5 times EBITDA. It's not $2 million because they have to replace the labor cost. So what you're really getting is, let's say the practice is netting $400,000, but they're going to have to pay somebody, $250,000 to do that dentistry. you're getting 5 times that 150. You're getting 750, not 200 million or $2 million for your practice.
Okay.
Right. So that's really tricky. Now, it can be very confusing because, the average doctor might say, all right, well, they're offering 5 to 7 times, sometimes EBITDA, and they look at their tax return, they say, all right, well, here's what I claim, here's depreciation, interest, whatever. And they think they're going to get zillions of dollars for their practice. And then the reality sits in.
Okay.
Also with that, if they're calculating the EBITDA, they are going to stick to that earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. When I do a valuation, when any broker or valuator does a valuation, we're going to go back and then we're going to say, all right, well, listen, you're writing off your car, personal insurance, continuing ed. You don't have to go to Hawaii to take continuing ed, right? So that could be upwards of $50,000 in other personal add backs at 5 times. That's $250,000 more your practice is really worth.
Right. Right. So, okay. So they calculate it differently, I guess. What are some, you said there's a few things they do differently, or they tricks of the trade. What else do they do just so that people can be aware of them?
I will say the biggest trick that they do is the post-closing employment that they look for.
Okay.
All right.
Talk about that.
So typically a DSO is going to want you to stay for 3 to 5 years after closing.
Okay.
All right. We're going to do some quick math here, and it's probably going to astound a lot of people. Let's say you have for easy math, you have a practice doing $1 million a year, with 20% of that practice is hygiene. Okay. Average net income of 40%, you're bringing in $400,000 a year. All right. That's what you've been making for the last few years of your career. Now you sell. You become a W-2 employee. All right. Now you're getting paid a percentage of your collections or production. For easy math, we're going to use 33%. Okay, of what you do. Now it's not 33% of the whole 100,000. It's just what you're doing.
Yeah.
The $800,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still working just as much, right? You're going to get paid instead of $400,000 a year. You're going to get paid $264,000 a year. Okay. So every year that you work there and don't own that practice, you're losing $136,000 a year. Okay. So let's say they gave you $750,000 for that practice. I was doing $1 million. There's easy math, 75%. It's pretty close across the country. It's going to be higher or lower some places, but the minimum is typically 3 years they want you to stay. You just lost $136,000 a year for 3 years. You didn't get $750,000 for that practice. You got $342,000 for that practice.
Because you subtract that off the 750.
Right. 5 years, you didn't get $750,000 for your practice. You got $70,000. Think about that.
I don't want to think about that.
Less than 10% of what you thought you were getting.
Oh my God.
And that's really a dirty secret. These DSOs are basically getting you to pay for your practice.
I'm speechless. I'm speechless.
And it's simple math, and nobody wants to look at it.
Yeah. So who does it make sense then to, I mean, if we stopped right there and said, oh my God, the world needs to know this is a terrible deal. So like, who is this a good move for? Is this, I mean,
it's a good move for larger practices where the owner of the practice has stepped away from clinical dentistry as much as they can, and it's more associate driven. Where they're not going to be required to,
because they're baked into the purchase price already.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're selling a business. Most dentists are not business owners; they're self-employed. Right? There's a difference.
Yeah.
You own a business. The business kind of you own it, but it's making you money. You're there to make that money, right? If you cannot be there and make that money, that's when it makes more sense.
Okay. So then if you are the owner operator and not the owner with associates doing it, what are good places to sell at that when you're ready?
So here's the problem. So if you're doing $2 million a year, you don't have much of a choice. All right. Now, we've done them. We've sold practices that big, to husband and wife dentist teams, other dentists want to be partners. So you can find buyers for those practices.
Mhm.
Once you start getting up into the $3 million range, DSOs, unfortunately, are probably your only option to sell.
Interesting. So sell before. That's kind of simplistic, but just reacting to what you said. But I mean,
Or like I said, continue to own and make that money off the practice.
bring in
If
associates,
you,
replace
yeah, bring
yourself.
in
Yeah.
associates and just kind of a good office, good regional manager,
Yeah.
to run it, definitely makes more sense. But,
Okay.
ultimately it's, I tell all my clients too, that, the sale of your dental practice should not be your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It should be the gravy on top.
Mm-hmm.
If you're banking on to sell your practice for your retirement, you've already kind of screwed up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this $2 million-ish number, that's a really pivotal number, it sounds like.
Yes.
That range
Yeah,
at least.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we can probably still find private buyers
Mm-hmm.
or maybe smaller DSOs that aren't going to make you work as long. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
can get them usually 2 years is they still want.
Okay.
Which isn't the worst thing in the world, but
Mm-hmm.
just know that you're really not getting that full purchase price if you are required to stay for a really long transition.
Right. So if your design, your vision is I want to be, around at least 2 million bucks, sounds like you should bake into your vision, and I should be backing away from the day-to-day
Yeah,
clinical work. That sound
absolutely.
right? Okay.
Absolutely. Or just know that, that practice. I just did one recently, actually, in Rochester. The doctor was not interested in working for DSO at all. And we basically had to sell the practice to a solo doctor who probably could only do half as much as the doctor was doing there.
Hmm.
And we sold it pretty much for half of what it was really worth. But at the same time, if he was required to stay that three
Yeah.
years, you're still ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want out, just
Yeah.
be ready to, take a lower price or, be reasonable.
Yeah. And so that example right there, did that seller, is she retired now, or they're sort of
He flipped the keys. He was there for 30 days and moved out of state.
and just
His
left?
wife, what they bought a house already. His wife was leaving, and she said,
Mm.
"I'm leaving with you or without you." And happy wife, happy life.
That
So
that
gone,
takes some of your
and
negotiating
he
leverage out,
he'd done
doesn't it?
very well over the years, so he
Okay.
could afford to. The sale of
Okay.
his practice had zero to do with his retirement.
Got it. And so that was the next question is sort of, it's this event. The sale is an event, but now what? You're going to have, you hope
Yeah,
to have a lot of years life left, active years, good years.
yeah.
What do you do with yourself? What do you see?
Yeah. What I will say is I'm not a firm believer, if you do sell to a DSO and they promise that, oh, we're going to get rid of all the headaches, you don't have to deal with staff or anything like that anymore. These staff members have been working for you for years now. I find it very hard to believe that they are still not going to approach you with issues in the practice. You
Hmm.
can only say go to HR so many times. And I'm
Hmm.
sure, it's a family a lot of times, the
Yeah.
staff members. You're going to feel obligated, to
Yeah.
try to help. And so I don't think it's going to eliminate the headaches
Okay.
that they promise that it
And
will.
do you like the super big DSOs? Do they like bring in sort of like different operating principles, different sort of
Yes.
ways, and they say, look, you know, with complaints, go like, do they bring those things in?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. You're still in the office though, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the operating, yeah, you're going to be using their software.
Hmm.
Um, that regional manager is going to be, you know, porting it to the software from a different location most of the time to check on everything, making sure
Hmm.
you're hitting the production that you're supposed to hit,
Yeah.
right? Um, a lot of times you don't have a choice in what lab you use, what supplies you use.
Right.
So these are all little things too that can be negotiated, um, in the sale, right?
Okay.
You gotta know all this stuff going in. If you have a favorite lab guy and does really good work, you send it over, you get it back, you never have any problems. It's gonna be a lot different than if they want you to use some lab that's charging $90 a crown
Yeah.
somewhere, and that's just being shipped
Hmm.
back and forth from wherever, right?
Well, and there's an example of, you said earlier, have somebody represent you. Who would
Mhm.
think of something like that? Like
Yeah,
who would
people
think
have
of all
done it
these
hundreds of times.
this is what it takes. I mean, on your
Yeah,
maiden
yeah,
voyage of selling something, are you really gonna trust yourself to really, factor all these things in that
yeah.
matter? It's just,
Yeah, I think that a lot of doctors that sell the DSOs, you have to remember they are getting inundated with mailings and things to their office. And keep in mind, they're mailing that stuff whether they're interested in your office or not. So you get a letter and you're all excited, like, oh, they want to buy me. And then
I
you're
feel
like,
so
well, yeah,
special.
doctor,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're only doing $600,000 a year and they're not, they're not
Hmm.
going to buy you, right? But a lot of them, I think, also may look at, all right, well, I don't have to hire a broker and, pay a commission.
It's
And
so
it's like, I
cheap.
can
It's so
promise you
cheap.
the
It's so
commission
cheap.
pales in comparison by
Ah,
the amount of money that you will lose doing it on your own.
it's so cheap. I know.
Yeah.
I know. Um, I think about this house again, one day maybe I'll sell it to one of my kids. I don't know. I'm still gonna have a broker. Like just keep us, make sure we
Yeah.
do everything right.
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
attorney, you can use an attorney
Yeah,
for, yeah, you
yeah.
need
Somebody,
somebody,
just please help us
Yeah.
be lawful and get everything done right.
I will say on that topic, whether you're selling to a DSO or a private buyer,
Hmm.
I will say as important as the broker in your account, the attorney
Hmm.
has to have experience in these deals.
I was gonna say,
I've seen so many attorneys screw up these deals because they have no idea what they're doing.
yeah,
So if you have a brother-in-law that's an attorney or a cousin or something that, has
yeah,
not done this before, but you always use them for everything, let them sit this one out.
yeah. I've had occasion to say that on maybe a handful of episodes where it's just choose the expert with the specialist knowledge, right? So there's
Yes.
plenty of good business attorneys out there. There's plenty of good transactional, but this is different.
Yeah.
And yeah,
It's
there's just,
shocking how different it is.
and just
Yeah.
ask them. So how many of these have you done? And
Yeah.
unless you hear a healthy number recently, by the way, well, I did 20 of them 10 years ago. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. I don't know. Pick the specialist. Even for you,
Yes,
it's like
absolutely.
I buy and sell businesses. Awesome. How many dental practices have you done? A couple. I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know,
I can tell you how many practices I've sold that weren't dental. One.
one.
And I'll never do it again.
What was it?
Oh, it was an optometry practice.
Yeah, see?
It was actually the wife of a dentist that we were selling. They were relocating, and
Okay.
she asked us to sell that as well, and we did it.
Yeah.
But I'm not interested in doing anything but dental.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I did one
Because
veterinary valuation once, and I'll tell you, I've taken my animals to the vet. I've never been behind the curtain. Like Oz,
yeah.
right? And going behind the curtain in a veterinary office is not fun. All right, they put a yellow lab down in the room next to me, and I could see right through the door.
Oh my
It was
God.
the worst thing I ever did. And I told my partner, my father, it's my partner. I told him never again.
Yeah.
Don't even ask.
Oh
Not
my
going to
God. That's
happen.
painful. That's
Yeah,
terrible.
it
Yeah.
was brutal. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's just how my brain operates. I'd rather know fewer things, but know them deeper because
yeah,
deeper insights win. It's just like,
yeah.
and it just, you can't make those insights come faster. They just come
No,
at their pace,
yeah,
so
100%.
totally agree.
And I will say this too. One of the reasons we've been so successful focusing on dental, is financing is so easy to get these buyers.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly easy. Um, that might be something else I want to just say
Hmm.
to your audience. A lot of when I speak for NYSDA and a lot of the future retiring doctors always ask, how can these kids buy my practice when they have all these student loans, right?
Good question.
And the answer is it's easy, right? If they didn't have those student loans, they wouldn't be a dentist. They wouldn't be able to buy your practice, right?
Hmm.
So there you go. So the banks, the specialty lenders know this. They have
Hmm.
zero problem with it. One of the tricks DSOs are doing is they go into these dental schools and they speak.
Hmm.
And one of their messages is to these because they need employees when they graduate, right?
Yeah, right.
They say, you can't go buy a practice until you pay off your student loans. So
Son of
they're
a bitch. That's
perpetuating
jeez.
this myth, right? So now what happens is it's actually the opposite is true, right? You should not be paying off your student loans because these banks want to see that you're financially responsible. Not only good credit, but they want to see you've been saving money. If you have been aggressively paying off your student
Right.
loans and haven't been saving any money, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get a loan on a
Yeah.
practice.
So pay them
They
off,
want
but pay like on schedule, not ahead of
pay
schedule.
really just pay them on schedule
Yeah.
as you know, and then once you start making money as a private owner, that's when you get rid of them. Typically, they're lower interest. You
Hmm.
shouldn't be in a big hurry to pay them off.
Hmm.
Um, and it's surprising, when you go from making $150,000 a year as an associate to making $300,000 a year as an owner,
Hmm.
how easy it is to pay off those student loans.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's true. I mean, a couple points there. One, there are specialty bankers, healthcare bankers, and who zero in on dentistry or medical and dentistry. Go with
Yeah.
them, not the generalist. Um, and then yeah, they ask them for the answers about, or you about how do I make this work financially? But yes, they
Yeah.
are not stupidly, but they're smartly like you can get this done. You can you're not
You can get it
you're not
easily
poor
done.
though you may feel you are,
Yeah.
from our point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
There's a couple of wrap-up questions I ask every
Sure.
guest. The first one is there anything you think I should have asked you in the context that we're talking about, but I just didn't think to ask you?
Um, like I said, DSOs really aren't as big as they appear. I do want your listeners to realize that, you read all these dental economics, these publications, which, they all typically paid advertising and things. Um, you know, uh, Alaska, right?
Hmm.
There's 2% of dentists are affiliated with DSOs. I think
Hmm.
that's like the smallest one, right? Some of
Okay.
the lower populated states, right? The biggest one's Nevada is 23%. Okay,
Interesting.
so a lot of this has to do with whether or not you can own a dental practice as a non-dentist. So
Okay.
states where you can own a dental practice as a non-dentist, that percentage is going to be higher, right?
Okay.
New York State, where I am, you have to be a dentist to own a dental practice or at least be a partner,
Hmm.
in a DSO. 7% right now is the number.
Okay.
Also, the growth of DSOs in New York State in 2012, it was 6.3%.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, not
10 years
much.
later, it's 7%.
Yeah.
It's not taken off.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, a lot of it, the ADA actually just put out um, some statistics on the ages of the dentist and the percentage of those dentists, that are affiliated with DSOs. And as I suspected, the younger doctors, the doctors 0 to 5 years out of school, there's about 12.5% of dentists work for DSOs. And they
Okay.
have to listen, it's a great place to go work, build your speed. Hopefully you don't pick up too
Yeah.
many bad habits, right?
Hmm.
Whereas doctors, 6 to 10 years out, it drops down to just under 9%.
Okay.
So, that tells me that there are still doctors buying practices.
Yeah.
Okay. So they go there, they take the job, and then, they come out of there when they're ready.
Hmm.
Most of our buyers are 3 to 5 years out of school.
Hmm.
And then they're ready to buy. So that's why that number dips down. They are
Got it.
going into private practice. So there are buyers out there, obviously. I will say the only thing that really prohibits the sale of a dental practice is usually location and size, mostly
Okay.
location. So if you're in a real small town, rural area,
Hmm.
it can be tough. It can be difficult. It could take years to find
Hmm.
somebody. It really can. Um,
Even if it's a healthy practice?
yeah, yeah, it has to be pretty healthy. I will say if you're in a real small town, you better be doing $1 million a year to attract a
Okay.
buyer to go to that town, unless by chance we find somebody that grew up in that town and wants to come
Sure.
home.
Yeah.
That those are great. Those are the best transitions when you get the hometown kid to come home
Hmm.
and take over the senior doctor's practice in town.
Hmm.
It's excellent.
Okay.
Other than that, like I said, you got to practice doing $1 million or netting to 40%. You got 5 ops and you're in a good location to attract associates. You don't have to sell to a DSO. We'll easily find a buyer for your practice.
Hmm.
You're in a suburban location. If that's the other thing, DSOs aren't going to those locations because it's hard to find associates for those locations,
Mm.
right? You're not going to convince associate to move to, the middle of the Adirondack Mountains, right?
Yeah.
To, work in dental practice. So
Right.
it can be difficult.
Okay. Okay. And then the other question I ask is, so we've caught somebody's attention, they're thinking about selling, um, but they're sort of stuck on where to start other than, yeah, I want to sell.
Yeah.
Where can they get started? Just simple things to get them off the starting line.
Step one is have evaluation done of your practice.
Okay.
By
No
somebody
self
who's
valuations.
no self valuations, and don't have your accountant do it.
Ooh, yeah.
Unfortunately, unless your accountant has a lot of dental
Yeah.
transition experience, there are definitely accountants out there that do what I do. There's the Academy of Dental CPAs. Those guys and
Okay.
girls are great, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are other people out there, but you have to make sure they have dental experience, because if you just go in and value the practice based on USPAP standards of valuing a business, first of all, buyer's not going to be able to read it because they're not a
Okay.
CPA, right?
Yeah.
But you have to know what your practice is worth. Where I'm going to go in, I'm going to show you, all right, well, this is what it's worth on paper. This is my advice of where you should end up on a sale price,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to get a valuation. That's step one. After making sure that you are actually ready to retire.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will get back to that, being ready to retire.
Mm-hmm.
You got to talk to your financial advisor, make sure you're financially able to retire without the sale of your practice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's key. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure he or she wants you at home all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All
Which
right.
sounds funny, but it's
Yeah,
funny. No, seriously, just imagine.
um,
Yeah.
and make sure you've given some thought on what you're going to do in retirement too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of dentists, identify themselves as dentists, and you got to have some outside interest, right? You're not going to be a dentist anymore,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
And if you're not retiring, you're selling to go
yeah,
work.
yeah,
Yeah, you were saying earlier, it's, maybe you're being promised, or you're in your mind, you're promising yourself it's going to be a whole different world. And you were
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
not as different.
I don't think it's going to be as different
Not
as
as
they
different.
promise.
Yeah.
It's going to be, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Other than lower income, I guess.
And I will say this though, too, just because you sell your practice doesn't mean you have to retire completely, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you want to go to Florida. You can go get a job a day or two a week and still probably make more money than most of the population.
Depending on where you
So
are. Yeah.
it's a great part-time job. If you still
That's
want to keep your
interesting.
license and,
Mm-hmm.
get your hands dirty,
Yeah.
and not give it up completely, it's a great part-time job.
Are there DSOs that hire part-time dentists?
Yeah, I think they hire anybody they can get.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing that sounds interesting is, it's not so quick, but it sounds important, is think about this $2 million threshold, right? If you have designs to get there, you're getting closer. Your buyer pool could change depending on how you're organized. So
Yeah.
think that puppy through, because you want a lot of offers. I mean, whenever you're selling anything, you want a lot of offers. So set yourself up for that way. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Sean, thank you. This is really interesting stuff.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we came across like it's got its place to sell just like anything else.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of
options,
nooks and crannies in there in that transaction. So make sure you know what you're talking about. Cool. So thanks for coming on. You supplied some contact information, which we're going to put in the show notes for your episode. Yep. And so anybody who wants to contact you, they've got another way of doing it. Couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you're like Sean or I, and you serve private practice owners in one way or another, and you've got some experience or expertise that you want to share with private practice owners, or if you're a private practice owner yourself, you think you've figured out something on the business side and you think others would benefit from it, either way, we want you to come on Practice Care and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Sean's episode and every episode, there's a link, couple of clicks, super quick and easy. Just tell us what's on your mind so that we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, we have a new episode every week. The easiest way to stay up to date is to subscribe. Just search Practice Care, one word. You'll find us, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Google, Amazon, pretty much every major player and platform. We're easy to find, subscribe, and that way you can stay up to date. Thanks very much, and until next time.